and we have 9 catapult centres in the North East. We're driving the North East economic renaissance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the North East is indeed a centre of science excellence in offshore wind, life sciences, batteries and much more. And we're home to 3,500 tech firms who bring £2 billion to our local economy. Now, European structural funds provide support to SMEs to start up, innovate and grow, but all that stops at the end of this month. What will the Minister be doing to ensure that that development continues and that support continues?
Minister. Thank you. It's an excellent question. That's why we have set out the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is now fully deployed around the country. It's why, secondly, we've made the commitment to increase domestic R&D outside the Greater South East by 40% between now and 2030, and 50% of government R&D in the old bays outside of the Greater South East. And this afternoon, I don't want to preempt the Chancellor, but there will be announcements about how we support regional science and technology growth.
Would you know that? Vital fabricants.
Nissan is one of the most productive plants in Sunderland in the whole Nissan network. What meetings has he had with Nissan regarding their work?
Minister.
Since arriving in this new portfolio, I haven't had any meetings with Nissan, but we are, as a department now, actively picking up the clean tech piece, the future energy technologies piece, and we're working with a range of companies, as well as with the Department for Business and Trade and the Department for Energy and Net Zero.
Shadow Minister Chiamora.
Thank you. Across the country, our regions are home to thousands of brilliant science startups and spin-outs. But they are being hit by a Tory quadruple whammy, slashing R&D tax credits, leaving them with on average £100,000 less to spend on research per year, £120 million cliff edge loss of European regional development funding, lack of access to capital. The UK has the lowest business investment in the G7, and of course continuing uncertainty over association with the £95 billion Horizon Europe, the biggest science fund in the world. Which of these barriers to growth for our innovative businesses will the Minister sort out today?
Well, it's a great shame the shadow spokeswoman is so determined to talk UK down. The truth is, in the last 10 years, the life science sector has grown 1,000%. The North East, where she's from, is driving that. And I just don't recognise that the UK sector is being held back in the way that she says. But I do accept, and the Chancellor will be saying more this afternoon about the tax and business environment, the R&D tax credits. The reason they're up so much, everybody, is that our innovation economy, we've gone from 1.7% of GDP to 2.8%. That is a huge success over the last 10 years, and we are responsible for it.
Fletcher.
Question number 3, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We want fantastic connectivity in every part of the UK. We've worked to make sure a range of low-cost social tariffs are available in 99% of the UK for as little as £10 a month, highlighting that in our Help for Households campaign and working with the DWP to make them easier to access for low-income households, but also working on digital skills with the Department for Education.
Fletcher.
I thank the Minister for that answer. And while we continue to make progress on this front, could she remind utility companies, and in particular British Gas, that not everybody has access to a computer and not everybody has access to the internet, and it would be helpful if their services reflected that?
Minister.
I thank him for raising his concerns about British Gas. I, as a digital infrastructure minister, want to make sure that everybody does have that great access to the internet, but he might be interested to know that over suppliers with over 50,000 customers must allow people to pay energy bills in cash or on prepayment and to talk to them over the phone.
McGovern.
Speaker, what assessment has the Minister made of the impact of cryptocurrency technologies on low-income households?
Good point.
Thank you for her question. I confess that the cryptocurrency issue is not within my portfolio, but I should be happy to refer her to a minister who may be able to answer.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 4 and 9 together. Backed by our commitment to increasing public expenditure on research and development to £20 billion by the 2024 to 25, we have launched our plan to cement the UK's place as a science and technology superpower by 2030, fostering the right conditions for industry, innovation and world-leading research.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The threat posed by the collapse of SBP posed a huge challenge to science and tech businesses in Oxfordshire. Can she update the House on what she's been doing to help those companies so they no longer have to look into the abyss?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. The futures of so many companies and thousands of UK jobs were at stake, and my department worked tirelessly with the Treasury to facilitate a solution. And in doing so, we have protected our life sciences sector as well as our tech sector, which not only drives economic growth across the country, but will also deliver life-saving products.
Tim Morton.
Mr. Speaker, research and development is particularly resource intensive and in need of raising capital. So what is the government doing to help tech and life science companies in particular raise money on the London markets, which has been few and far between recently?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to making the UK the most attractive place for innovation and businesses to start and grow. The Treasury has made significant reforms to improve London as a listing destination, and we continue to engage with sectors to secure the most innovative companies in the UK Stock Exchange.
Don Jarvis.
Speaker, Western Park Cancer Centre is one of only 4 specialist cancer facilities in the country and is at the forefront of groundbreaking research. Investment is critical to its ongoing success in the field of cancer research. I recently met with the Health Minister to discuss opportunities to invest in Western Park. Will the Secretary of State look at what can be done to invest in that incredibly important technological facility?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a government that is putting its money where its mouth is. We are determined to ensure that by 2030 we are a science and tech superpower, and I am be delighted to meet the honourable member to discuss in detail his own constituency.
Christina Rees.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister is aware of the Global Centre of Rail Excellence being developed in my Neath constituency, which will become the UK's first net zero rail testing facility, a shared campus for rail innovation, research and development, testing and verification for mainline passenger and freight railways, developing next-generation solutions for the rail sector. The UK Government has pledged £30 million for the GCRE, of which £20 million has been received for the construction phase. Will the Minister reconfirm her Government's commitment to deliver the remaining £10 million for research and development?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was unsure as that question, but this government is investing a great deal, £20 billion by 24-25. We are determined to ensure that we become a science and tech superpower. This department has already hit the ground running and produced the science and tech framework and announced £370 million of additional funding. I'm happy to meet with the honourable member to discuss in detail exactly the point that she was trying to raise.
Carol Monaghan, the SNP spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, Stephen Phipson, the head of Make UK, said Horizon had always been one of those areas of the EU budget where the UK gets out more than it puts in. While the Secretary of State dithers about whether association is value for money, researchers are leaving the UK for better opportunities abroad, where they can develop rich collaborations and enjoy freedom of movement. This issue needs urgent action, so when will we have a decision on whether the UK will associate to Horizon?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have not changed our position regarding Horizon. An association was in the TCA, and we welcome the EU's recent openness to discussion after 2 years of delay, and this was a matter that I discussed directly with the EU Ambassador yesterday.
Stephen Bonner.
Number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My department's work will ensure that we are breaking down barriers and levelling the playing field so that more women can enter STEM jobs in research and innovation. This includes UKRI's funded STEM ambassadors in school, and just last week the government announced £150,000 funding to support women who have taken career breaks and need skills to get back into STEM careers.
Stephen Bonner.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to Brexit, universities in the UK have lost almost £1 billion in EU funds, with 115 cancelled grants last year alone. Unfortunately, many EU-based workers, like researchers, now feel unwelcome by the hostility of the United Kingdom and have followed the funding out of the UK. My constituent, Miss McCallum's long-term partner, is French. He is unable to secure a visa to work in our STEM sector. The complexities of the system and the cost attached are making it impossible for him to choose to reside in Scotland. What steps is she taking to reduce visa costs for skilled workers, incentivising them to come to the UK and set up home here with their families?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do not for one moment underestimate just how important it is to attract some of the best and the brightest to the UK to work in both science and technology and to study here. And just last week we announced the Global Talent Network for AI. Since 2020, it is this government that has created the Global Talent Visa. We've created new routes such as the High Potential Individual route, and we've also done the Scale-Up route. It's this government that is delivering.
Alex Davies-Jones.
Speaker, since our departure from the EU, the UK needs to forge our own regulatory path, not yet, to provide certainty to businesses investing in the UK, as well as providing confidence to consumers. However, UK law has failed to tackle harms, including fake reviews and subscription traps that we all now encounter online. The government claims it is taking action, yet we still have no legislation. Another delay, another broken promise. So can the Secretary of State finally tell us when we can expect to see the Digital Markets, Competition and Consumer Bill finally laid in Parliament?
Speaker, we've committed to delivering this session, and further details will be announced by the Leader of the House in due course.
The Secretary of State paid tribute to the quality of the workforce we have in the UK for science and technology, and in North Hertfordshire, where companies like Johnson Matthey are doing fantastic work in the environmental field, and in neighbouring Stevenage, Airbus and other wonderful businesses. And will she do all she can to get us back into the EU programmes?
Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely because we do have the best and the brightest in this country that we can lead the way, and I do pay tribute to the people that work in her constituency. I look forward to visiting them as soon as I can, and as I said before, our position on Horizon has not changed.
Jill Furness.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Who's answering? One of you, Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 2016, Innovate UK's Women in Innovation programme has been empowering women in innovation, and since the launch of the campaign, the number of women leading applications for grants to Innovate UK has raised by 70%.
Jill Furness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, women make up less than 30% of the STEM workforce, and the government's own findings reveal vast inequalities of women in the R&D sector. The creation of this department represents a key opportunity to tackle this issue head-on. So will the Minister commit to bold action to finally reach a 50-50 STEM workforce?
Thursday.
Yeah, we made this a key part of our science and technology framework because it is absolutely essential that we are empowering and enabling individuals and creating those skills from the off. UKRI have already funded STEM inspiration programmes such as the STEM Ambassadors. There's a lot of initiatives that I could take her through, but obviously we're short on time, but we are trying our very best to encourage women and level the playing field.
Maria Miller.
Mr. Speaker, a trade delegation of more than 40 women who run technology and science businesses in Canada were welcomed by the Trade Secretary at a business event in Lancaster House yesterday. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that support for women in tech across the globe should be an important part of all our international trade work?
Thursday.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I absolutely agree, and I believe that the event went very well yesterday. And it is important that we also look at our global role models that are British. If we look, for instance, at Professor Dame Angela McLean, who will become the first female government chief scientific advisor. If we look at Dr. Nicola Fox, if we look at Rosemary Coogan, all of these people are flying the flag for women in STEM.
Come to Departmental, Siobhan Bailey.
Question number 1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. DSIT was created with a single mission to drive innovation that will deliver improved public services, new, better paid jobs and grow the economy. Our department will do things differently and be a model for how modern government departments should run. And we've hit the ground running. In just a few weeks of setting up, We have set out a comprehensive framework for science and technology, announced £370 million of new spending, and we've introduced the new Data and Digital Infrastructure Bill. And we've worked with the Chancellor to take decisive action to facilitate a deal to save the former the UK arm of the Silicon Valley Bank, protecting hundreds of jobs. This is an extraordinary amount for any department to achieve, let alone in just 5 weeks, and it is just the start of a constant drumbeat.
Siobhan Bailey.
I was thrilled that my verification campaign to tackle anonymous abuse was successful with government, but I was also always clear that making it obvious if someone was verified needs to be clear on social media. This is important to social media users. Does my right honourable friend think this is important too, and how is the online safety bill progressing through the Lords?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill is currently in the House of Lords and will soon be at committee stage. We are committed to ensuring that it passes before the end of this session, and I would want to pay tribute to the excellent work that my honourable friend has done in this area. As she will know, we are committed to ensuring that abuse and the online safety bill places a duty on the largest online services to give adult users the option to verify themselves.
Secretary Lucy Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. 3 weeks ago, the Secretary of State said that TikTok on government devices is a personal choice. At the weekend, it was reported that a review of TikTok is to be carried out. And this week, the Prime Minister said he is considering a ban. So can she tell the House today, is it a personal choice, or does TikTok pose a security risk on officials' devices?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ensuring the security of UK data is a priority, and our experts continue to monitor the threats posed to data. The Government Security Group, led by the Cabinet Office, are reviewing the evidence base to take action for government devices. What I actually said, Mr. Speaker, was in terms of the general public, it is absolutely a personal choice. But because we have the strongest data protection laws in the world, we are confident that the public can continue to use it. That is very different to what the honourable member stated.
Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. In communities like Cheriton and Bramdean in my Mearn Valley constituency, their constituents have not been able to take part in the broadband voucher scheme because they're connected to a different cabinet to their neighbours, which in some cases is only a few metres from their door. Can my honourable friend assure me that these communities will be able to benefit from the new procurement as soon as possible?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to say premises in the Meon Valley are included in our live gigabit procurement for Hampshire. We expect to award a contract in June this year. We've paused new applications for vouchers to avoid doubling up on public subsidy, but we're happy to look into any particular cases that she wishes to raise via Be the UK.
Janet Davies.
During the last Horizon Europe funding round, researchers, scientists and universities in London received nearly £2 billion. Yet the Tories have overseen 2 years of uncertainty, delay and broken promises, harming researchers and businesses in Lewisham East and across the capital. So when will the Secretary of State do as Labour would do and secure association to the world's biggest science funding programme?
Minister.
Over the last 2 years, we have not only continued to negotiate in good faith to see through the agreement we made to join Horizon Copernicus and Atom, we've also continued to fund the sector with just over £1.5 billion of funding, including £370 million this week, £480 million before Christmas, and we look forward to discussing the European associations shortly.
Sir Edward Lee.
The government has announced that they're going to create a wonderful new nuclear fusion centre at West Burton. That's the technology of the future. West Burton is not 5 miles from the town of Gainsborough. Will the government rename this research centre West Burton Gainsborough to celebrate our wonderful town?
Minister.
He makes an excellent point. It's a very exciting facility which will see this country lead in the industrial deployment of fusion connectivity to the grid.
Cole Turner. Not here. Jonathan Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I would like to ask the Minister, will he join a meeting with Councillor Abby Brown and myself to see the power of Silicon Stoke ready to be unleashed alongside our fantastic gigabit broadband rollout, our world-class university, established university, and of course the digital T-levels that we already have on display, so we can truly create those fantastic new jobs for the future.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I would be delighted to, and the Honourable Member is a fantastic ambassador for his constituency, always pushing and promoting the great work that is being taken.
Mr. Speaker, according to TechNation, Slough, the Silicon Valley of the UK, has experienced a 536% increase in the formation of digital startups since the last decade. So, Minister, given that artificial intelligence is a strategic importance to the UK, why has the government cut research and development tax credits for SMEs?
Anybody, Minister?
The honourable gentleman will know that there is a review going on about R&D tax credits. The Chancellor will be standing up later, but the TechNation and the work that's been done over the last decade means that we've got a great tech ecosystem to build on.
William Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A year ago, the Department announced that Penistone had been chosen for a UK-first trial to deliver high-speed broadband through water pipes. This fibre-in-the-water project, in partnership with Yorkshire Water, is of huge interest to my constituents, as it promises the opportunity for rural areas to access high-speed broadband without the cost and inconvenience of major infrastructure works. So can the Department update me as to the progress of this project and how quickly my constituents might see the benefits?
Minister.
Has been a fantastic and innovative project. We expect to complete research in May, and I hope to be able to update the Honourable Lady on all the fantastic work that she's been doing on this.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I'd like to point out that live subtitles and the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings are available to watch on permanentlive.tv. We start with questions to Prime Minister. Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since I was at this dispatch box a week ago, the government has been delivering for the British people. At the UK-France summit, we signed a new illegal immigration deal to protect our borders. Over the weekend, we facilitated the sale of Silicon Valley Bank at no cost to the taxpayer. And we have launched a submarine partnership with Australia and the US, launched our integrated review and boosted our defence budget. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've worked for years with women brought here illegally as sex slaves, raped by 30 men a day. Last week, the Prime Minister tweeted that these victims would be denied access to support from our modern slavery system. A tweet that traffickers will hold up to these women and say, see, no one will help you. Before the Prime Minister parrots his prepared answer about increases in the number of people accessing our modern slavery system, let me educate him and everyone else in this House that the biggest increase in the last 10 years has been from the huge increase in British adults and children trafficked for sex and crime within Britain. Not a number they should be proud of. How exactly will I help the next woman I meet brought here illegally from being repeatedly raped if she, as he tweeted, is denied access from our modern slaves?
Mr. Speaker, just to correct the Honourable Lady, it is actually now a minority of people in our modern slavery referral system that are from the UK. That was not the intention of the legislation when it was introduced. We have a proud record of supporting victims of modern slavery, and thousands of victims are supported every year here in the UK, and that will not change as we grip illegal immigration.
Danny Kruger.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the Home Secretary said that in recent decades the immigration to this country has been too high, and all the benches opposite howled their disapproval. They want higher immigration, not lower. Does my honourable friend agree that what we we need to do is, rather than importing cheap foreign labour, we need to invest in the skills of our own young people and encourage businesses to do the same.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right that we do need to encourage long-term investment in the domestic workforce. We'll hear more from this in the Chancellor later this afternoon, but the Department for Work and Pensions is directing support at sectors with labour shortages like construction and social care, and our new skills boot camps are part of a dramatic rebooting of our skills system to support workers to get the skills that they need.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last summer, the Prime Minister claimed he wanted to protect free speech and put a stop to no platforming. So how concerned was he by last week's campaign by Tory MPs to cancel a broadcaster?
Prime
Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said at the time, the issues between Gary Lineker and the BBC were for them to resolve, and I'm very glad that they did, and we can look forward to watching Match of the Day again on our screens.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the sight of them howling with rage over a tweet, signing greening letters in their dozens, desperately trying to cancel a football highlight show. That should have been laughable. Instead, it led to a farcical weekend, with the national broadcast being accused of dancing to the government's tune by its own employees. Rather than blame everyone else, why doesn't he take some responsibility, stand up to his snowflake MPs waging war on free speech?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, just the usual political opportunism from the leader of the Labour Party. Because I don't know if he noticed. But actually first the Shadow Attorney General and then the Shadow Home Secretary actually criticised the language that had been used in the tweet. But what a surprise. He saw the chance to jump on a political bandwagon and changed his mind.
Keir Starmer.
So, Mr. Speaker,
I'm not being funny. I think our constituents want to get to the budget. The more that you shout, the more you progress questions. So please, my constituents interested if yours aren't. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, they want more of a Prime Minister who doesn't understand. You can disagree with what somebody says, but still defend their right to say it. He doesn't understand that. We're in a real problem. Does he accept that people's concerns about the BBC have been made worse because the government chose to put a Tory donor with no broadcasting experience in charge of the BBC?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as he well knows, the BBC chairman was appointed before I became Prime Minister. He was appointed.
And the same applies to this side. This budget matters to the people of this country. They want to hear it. Don't keep questions going longer than need be. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there was a rigorous, independent and long-established process. That appointment was supported by expert panel members, as well as the cross-party DCMS Select Committee. Now, it's right. That process is being independently reviewed by the Office for Commissioner of Public Appointments, and we should allow that review to conclude.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the problem is the chair of the BBC isn't just any old Tory donor. He's so close to the Prime Minister.
Order. Mr. Fabricant, I want you to be in for the budget. Cup of teas don't want to come that early.
Mr. Speaker, he's no ordinary Tory donor. He's so close to the Prime Minister, he's been described as his mentor. He helped arrange an £800,000 credit line for the former Prime Minister, a minor detail he forgot to tell the Select Committee which scrutinised his appointment. Does the Prime Minister think that his friend's position is still tenable?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I've just said, the Independent Office for Commissioner of Public Appointments is reviewing what was a rigorous independent process to appoint the chairman. Instead of prejudging and preempting that review, we should let it conclude and wait for the outcome. That is the right way to do things, and that's what the government will do.
Mr. Speaker, when people with links to the Tory party somehow find themselves in senior positions at the BBC, it's important that their impartiality is seen to be beyond reproach. So has the Prime Minister received assurances that no one with links to the Tory party was lobbied by Tory MPs or involved in the decision that saw Match of the Day effectively cancelled?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, these are matters. These are matters for the BBC to resolve. And it's right. It's right that the BBC, as an important institution, takes its obligations to impartiality seriously. Right? I care about the integrity and impartiality of our institutions, the BBC, but also the civil service, Mr. Speaker. And it's right that those processes carry on properly. But what I would say to him on this matter, there is an independent review. It's right that that process concludes, and he would, I would hope, respect that process.
He comes here today with these mealy-mouthed platitudes, pretending the actions of his party are nothing to do with him. But the whole country saw how he kept quiet and hid behind the playground bullies while they tried to drive someone out simply for disagreeing with them. An impartial public broadcaster free of government interference is a crucial pillar in our country. But isn't that put at risk by the cancel culture addicts on his benches, the BBC leadership that caves into their demands, and a Prime Minister too weak to do anything about them?
Mr. Speaker, we're not going to take any lectures on cancel culture from the party opposite. But we know what this is about, and he's avoided it in 6 questions. The substance of the issue that this underlined this tweet. And that's what has he done in this past week. The only thing he and his party have done is voted against our bill to stop the boats, Mr. Speaker. Siding with people smugglers over the British people. That's the substance of what's happened. Instead, what have we done is conclude a new migration deal with France, Mr. Speaker. We've managed to sign a new defence partnership with our allies, the US and Australia. We've protected British start-ups and we have boosted defence spending. And that, Mr. Speaker, is what delivering for Britain looks like.
Can I just say to you, the biggest day in the House, and you want to carry on cheering? I'll tell you what, I'll be quiet. Because there is plenty of rumours I've mentioned in the tea room for all sides. So let me say, Angela Richardson wants to get on with the questions. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For decades, Surrey Research Park in Guildford has been home to our pioneering space sector, with Surrey Satellite Technology Limited and now Surrey Space Centre's spacecraft project, which recently received £300,000 to train and recruit dedicated space engineers and create facilities to trial space-related technology. Will my right honourable friend join with me in welcoming this investment? And when his diary allows, will he come and visit Guildford to celebrate successful local innovation and job creation?
Well, I can reassure my honourable friend that we are continuing to invest in the UK's thriving space sector, including in her constituency, a new £6.5 million scheme to support high-impact projects. Space South Central, as she knows, is already the leading regional space cluster in the UK. There's more investment coming, and I look forward to either visiting myself or the Minister of State for Science, Innovation and Technology to make sure that her companies get the recognition they deserve.
SNP leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday, as households in Scotland were awakening to freezing temperatures, they were met with the news that the electricity grid had been upgraded in order to meet the power demands of the Prime Minister's new swimming pool. So may I ask him, was it whilst he was taking a leisurely dip that he decided to leave households drowning in their energy bills?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, thanks to the actions of this government, what we have provided is over £1,300 to help families with their energy bills over the last year. Now, I won't want to preempt what the Chancellor is going to say later, but this is a government that is committed to continuing to help people with the cost of living, and that's what you will hear later on.
Stephen Flynn.
You've got to wonder what planet he's on, Mr. Speaker, because for households in Scotland, energy prices haven't been frozen at £2,500. Indeed, the average bill in Scotland has been closer to £3,500, a near tripling in just under 2 years. But worse than that, the Chancellor is about to get to his feet and announced that the £400 energy rebate is about to be scrapped for everyone, not just in Scotland, but right across these aisles. So is it not the case that the Tories aren't freezing energy bills, they're looking to freeze households?
Mr. Speaker, actually, the government is delivering for people across the United Kingdom. Energy bills have been our priority, which is why over £1,000 of support, which is benefiting households in every part of our country. But he talks about delivery. It's now clear that we know, because of the SNP, that the trains don't run on time. The police are at breaking point. The police are at breaking point, and the NHS in Scotland experienced the longest ever waiting list. Mr. Speaker, that isn't even my assessment. That's what we learned in the SNP's leadership debate last week.
Aaron Bell. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Independent retailers are the lifeblood of our high streets and critical to the regeneration of our town centres, so we should cherish and celebrate the entrepreneurs who set them up and run them. With that in mind, would the Prime Minister join me in congratulating the winners of my recent competition to find Newcastle's best-loved independent shops and market stalls, namely Tony Price Quality Butchers, Mijouli's, Cheeky Cheesecakes, and the overall winner, Anasma Greek Bakery, who only opened in January 2021 and are already expanding to a second site.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend about the incredible benefit that small businesses and independent retailers bring to our high streets and our economy. I congratulate the team at Anasma Greek Bakery for winning the competition, and I know that they will feel reassured by their government's investment in his constituency through the Towns deal that they have, and of course funding from the Future High Streets Fund.
Stephen Furry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just ahead of St Patrick's Day, can I thank the Prime Minister for his recent deep engagement with Northern Ireland, in particular the conclusion of the Windsor Framework, and hopefully we will see the executive restored shortly. However, that executive is facing a spiral of budget cuts, which will stop it from transforming public services on an invest-to-save basis and investing in a prosperity agenda. So will the Prime Minister and indeed the Chancellor work with the Northern Ireland parties on a financial package in order to transform Northern Ireland, accepting the need for strict conditions and a real focus on key areas such as health, education, skills and infrastructure?
Well, can I thank the honourable gentleman and his colleagues and his party for the engagement they had in the run-up to the Windsor Framework. It was helpful and I appreciated his constructive involvement. And my right honourable friend, the Northern Ireland Secretary, has been working closely and will work closely with all Northern Irish parties, leading discussions on a wide range of issues, including the public finances, because I believe what the honourable gentleman believes is that the people of Northern Ireland need and deserve effective, accountable, devolved government up and running as quickly as possible, and I hope that those talks can be constructive in leading to that aim.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2016, the current Mayor of London promised 0 strikes on London Underground. Today is the 135th day of strikes since then. Will my right honourable friend join with me in condemning those strikes that have brought misery to the travelling public in London, and also condemn the Mayor of London for his failure to address this?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right about the misery being inflicted on Londoners by the incompetent running of TfL. It's worth bearing in mind, not only do the party opposite vote against our minimum service levels, which will provide respite for the hard-working British public, that the Mayor of London, since the pandemic, has received £6 billion of additional funding for transport services. So for us to be in the situation that we find ourselves in today is simply unacceptable.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
An investigation reported in The Guardian and the BBC revealed that in the last year, on more than 450 instances, sewage was leaking into cancer wards, maternity units and A&E departments. Without urgent action, the legacy of this Conservative government on the NHS will be an image of a nurse cleaning up sewage around a patient in a crumbling hospital. Will the Prime Minister commit to that pledge of building 40 hospitals by 2030, including in West Hertfordshire, and will he establish a fund to repair those hospitals that are in a dire state of disrepair?
Mr. Speaker, we are investing record sums in NHS capital to upgrade dozens of hospitals across the country, but in particular to build 40 new hospitals, and we are committed in particular to a new hospital scheme at West Hertfordshire Hospital NHS Trust as part of that programme, and the programme is working closely with the Trust on their plans in line with the approach that we have taken nationally.
Mark Plitchard. Speaker, does the Prime Minister agree with me that agri-tech is a vital part of the UK economy, and in particular the excellent work of the Crop and Environment Research Centre at Harper Adams University in Shropshire? I know he has a busy schedule, but could he dispatch the Secretary of State to come and look at that research centre, and in particular the women leading science and maths at Harper Adams, and indeed leading the world?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend, and in particular Harper Adams is a fantastic example of the type of innovation and skills provision that we need in our agri-tech sector, and that's why I'm pleased post-Brexit that we can introduce the gene editing bill, Mr. Speaker, which will help drive productivity and efficiency in our agricultural sector even further.
Speaker, the government promised the 40 new hospitals 3 years ago, and the Prime Minister's just expressed his intention to proceed again. 2 years ago, in St Mary's Paddington Hospital serving my constituency, a ward ceiling fell in during floods, the eye hospital was closed by a fire, and the birth centre and maternity wards are threatened by structural problems. This week, Trust managers said the infrastructure is having an increasing impact on staff and patients. We just can't afford to continue to waste money on failing buildings. But the hospital is waiting for the commitment from the government for the funding under the New Hospitals programme. Will today be the day that the Prime Minister commits to that specifically?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said in my previous answer, the government is committed to the New Hospitals programme. We've committed record sums to NHS capital, not just for that programme, but for smaller scale upgrades across the country, and those conversations with her trust and others are happening in the same way across the country, and I look forward to those conversations continuing.
Mr. Speaker, governments at all levels, national and local, should always strive to deliver value for money for the taxpayer, particularly in a cost of living crisis. Therefore, does the Prime Minister share my astonishment that my local Labour-led Westminster Council voted last week to raise council tax by 2%, council tenants' rents by 7%, and increase allowances for its senior councillors by up to a staggering 45%.
You've got to answer.
Well, Mr.
Can I just say, Prime Minister, I don't know who's giving you the advice, but take it from the chair. Please answer.
Mr. Speaker, it is disappointing to see that I think it's been just under a year that the now Labour-run Westminster Council has put its own councillors' pay ahead of everything else. I can't quite believe the figures that we heard from our honourable friend. A staggering, an eye-watering 45% pay increase when people across our country and indeed the ward are suffering cost of living pressures. It's clear, Mr. Speaker, that it's only Conservative-run councils that deliver for their residents.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every child in the UK is entitled to free NHS dental treatment, but with 80% of practices not accepting children as new patients, is the Prime Minister proud of his record on our children's dental health?
Mr. Speaker, we're investing £3 billion in NHS dentistry, and because of the reforms to the contract, there will be about 10% more activity this year above contracted levels. There are 500 more dentists in the NHS today, but also, I think, almost a 45% increase in the amount of dental care being provided to children.
Eric Thomas.
Mr. Speaker,
5 years ago, £40 million of public funds were set aside for brain tumour research, but recent government figures suggest that a little as a quarter of that money has been deployed to researchers. The mechanism to distribute research funding effectively is broken. As a result, the brain tumour community has not seen the breakthroughs in treatment and survival rates that many of us believe they should have. Does my friend the Prime Minister agree with me that a unique, complex disease needs a unique response? And in what is Brain Tumour Awareness Month, will he make brain cancer a critical research priority across all cancers?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his thoughtful and powerful question. He's absolutely right about the importance of medical research being expedited so we can deliver better care for the people who are affected. I'll make sure that he gets a meeting with the relevant minister so we can ensure that that funding gets out to the people who need it and we can bring relief to them as quickly as we can.
Joanna Chung.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the encouragement of the British government, female prosecutors and female judges in Afghanistan stood up for the rule of law and for a more inclusive and equal nation. Those left behind are in mortal danger. Last year, I met with senior officials at the Foreign Office who were open to making a specific case for at least some of these women to be relocated to the United Kingdom, but nothing has happened since then. This dire situation requires a prime ministerial intervention. So I'm not asking to meet the Prime Minister's officials or his ministers. I'm asking him directly, will he meet with me to see what we can do for these women?
Prime Minister.
I'm very happy to meet with the Honourable Lady, and she will know that we take our obligations to those who helped and served in Afghanistan extremely seriously, both through the ARAP scheme and the ACRS scheme. We have already brought 20,000 refugees from Afghanistan to the UK. We've worked closely with the UNHCR and others on those legal routes, but I'd be happy to meet with her to ensure that we're targeting our compassion, our generosity on the people who most need it and not those who are coming here illegally.
Caroline Ansell.
Mr. Speaker, at the height of the pandemic, centre-assessed grades allowed our young people to move forward with their lives. Lara, my very brave young constituent, is now battling cancer and will not sit the GCSE exams she has worked so hard for and could be left with only a certificate of recognition. In exceptional circumstances such as these, why can't the same principle apply? Would my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, look compassionately at this situation?
Prime Minister. Start by sending my best wishes to Lara and thanking my honourable friend for raising her case in Parliament. Of course, it's incredibly upsetting and challenging for children and young people to be diagnosed with a serious illness, and especially so close to their exams. Now, there are allowances that are made, and in the first instance, students will speak to their school or their college to make those reasonable adjustments, but I'll be happy to make sure that we work with my honourable friend to find a resolution in Lara's case.
Dr. Rupa Hutt.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the PM's numeracy drive, but did he know that some 7.1 million adults in England are functionally illiterate? It's often diagnosed late in life, like with TV's J Blades, if at all. So would he thank the entirely voluntary Read Easy, who are turning this round at just £250 cost per new reader, and commit to a national strategy for eradicating this problem that's costing our economy $25 billion a year in lost competitiveness?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Honourable Lady. Literacy and numeracy are critical for adults to be able to participate both in society and the economy. I'm happy to praise Read Easy for the work that they do. I look forward to learning more about them. But the best way to solve this problem is to ensure that our young children get the reading skills and training and education that they need. And I'm so pleased that because of the reforms introduced by this previous Conservative governments, particularly with phonics, we have now marched up the international league table and have some of the best results for reading that we've seen in a very long time.
Richard Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More than a quarter of the economic output of this country is in sectors overseen by some of our major regulators, such as Ofwat and Ofgem. But historically, there's been very little in the way of oversight to say whether they're doing a good job or a bad job, whether they're achieving international best practice or not. So can the Prime Minister look to see what he can do to address this historical oversight and enable regulators to play their part in ensuring economic growth?
Mr. Speaker, as always, my honourable friend makes a very thoughtful point, and he's absolutely right about the importance of our regulators in driving growth, competitiveness and investment in our economy. I know the Chancellor will have something to say on this later on, but he should rest assured that we will keep at it to make sure that there is accountability and oversight of our regulators. We all want to see more growth in our economy, and they need to play their part in delivering it.
Rem Stringer.
Mr. Speaker, 20 years after defeat in the Second World War, the first Japanese bullet train travelled the 300 miles from Tokyo to Osaka at 200 miles an hour. Isn't it a measure of the government's incompetence, yes, lack of commitment to the regions, lack of commitment to infrastructure, that it is now expected that 24 years after a Conservative Transport Secretary announced that HS2 would happen, that Birmingham, Manchester and London will not be linked by that time?
Mr. Speaker, we're actually delivering the biggest rail investment. Mr. Speaker, the biggest rail investment since the Victorian era. I'll just gently point out to the honourable gentleman, compared to when Labour were last in office, the investment going into the north is 30% higher every single year under this Conservative government. We are delivering for communities across the north with more trains, more buses, more stations and more roads, because a Conservative government doesn't just talk about it, it gets on and delivers it.
Sir Robert Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope very much that later today we'll hear news of help for motorists and small businesses. But for motorists and small businesses in Bromley and the rest of Outer London, they're going to be hard hit later this year by the Mayor of London's stealth tax in the form of an ultra-low emission charge. Cost money and jobs. Isn't it time to revisit the Local Government Act and revise it so that such charges can only be imposed on London boroughs with the consent of the boroughs themselves?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes an excellent point, and it's right that the Mayor of London should listen to the voices of commuters, of families and of small businesses as he inflicts his damaging tax on them. This government will always be on the side of those people, and this budget will deliver for them too.
And completes Prime Minister's questions.
Order! Order! Before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I have to remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available to them from the vote office in Members' Lobby at the end of the Chancellor's statement and, of course, online. It might also be helpful for some people who are following our proceedings to know that British Sign Language interpretation of the statement, which will continue until the end of the speech of the spokesman for the Scottish National Party, is available to watch on parliamentlive.tv advert. Live subtitling will also be available for the Chancellor's speech and the remainder of today's debate. I hardly need remind honourable members, but I will do for good measure, that they may not make interventions during the Chancellor's statement, nor indeed during the replies of the Leader of the Opposition, or even of the spokesman for the Scottish National Party. Call the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in the face of enormous challenges, I report today on a British economy which is proving the doubters wrong. In the autumn, we took difficult decisions to deliver stability and sound money. Since mid-October, 10-year gilt rates have fallen, debt servicing costs are down, mortgage rates are lower and inflation has peaked. The International Monetary Fund says our approach means the UK economy is on the right track. Yeah. But we remain vigilant and will not hesitate to take whatever steps are necessary for economic stability. Today, the Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts that because of changing international factors and the measures I take, the UK will not now enter a technical recession this year. They forecast we will meet the Prime Minister's priorities to halve inflation, reduce debt and get the economy growing. We are following the plan and the plan is working. But that's not all we've done. In the face of a cost of living crisis, we have demonstrated our values by protecting struggling families with a £2,500 energy price guarantee, one-off support and the uprating of benefits with inflation. Taken together, these measures are worth £94 billion over this year and next, one of the largest support packages in Europe. That averages, Madam Deputy Speaker, over £3,300 of cost of living help for every household in the country. Today, we deliver the next part of our plan, a budget for growth. Not just the growth that comes when you emerge from a downturn, but long-term, sustainable, healthy growth that pays for our NHS and schools, finds jobs for young people and provides a safety net for older people, all whilst making our country one of the most prosperous in the world. Prosperity with a purpose, and that is why growth is one of the Prime Minister's 5 priorities for our country. I deliver that today by removing obstacles that stop businesses investing, by tackling labour shortages that stop them recruiting, by breaking down barriers that stop people working, and by harnessing British ingenuity to make us a science and technology superpower. I start with the forecasts produced by Richard Hughes and his team at the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, who I thank for their diligent work. They have looked in detail at the Prime Minister's economic priorities. The first of those is to halve inflation. Inflation destroys the value of hard-earned pay, deters investment and foments industrial strife. This government remains steadfast in its support for the Independent Monetary Policy Committee at the Bank of England as it takes action to return inflation to the 2% target. Despite continuing global instability, the OBR report today that inflation in the UK will fall from 10.7% in the final quarter of last year to 2.9% by the end of 2023. That is more than halving inflation. High inflation, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the root cause of the strikes we've seen in recent months. We will continue to work hard to settle those disputes, but only in a way that does not fuel inflation. Part of the fall in inflation predicted by the OBR happens because of additional measures I take today. Firstly, I recognise that even though wholesale energy prices have been falling, there is still enormous pressure on family finances. Some people remain in real distress, and we should always stand ready to help when we can. So after listening to representations from Martin Lewis and other experts, I today confirm that the energy price guarantee will remain at £2,500 for the next 3 months. This means the £2,500 cap for the typical household will remain in place when energy prices remain high ahead of an expected fall in prices from July. This measure will save the average family a further £160 on top of the energy support measures already announced. The second measure concerns over 4 million households on prepayment meters. They're often the poorest households, but they currently pay more than comparable customers on direct debit. Ofgem has already agreed with suppliers a temporary suspension to forced installations of prepayment meters, but today I go further and confirm we will bring their charges in line with comparable direct debit charges. Under a Conservative government, the energy premium paid by our poorest customers, our poorest households, is coming to an end. Next, I have listened to representations from the honourable members for East Devon, North Cornwall, Colne Valley and Central Suffolk and North Ipswich about the risk to community facilities, especially swimming pools, caused by high costs. When times are tough, such facilities matter even more. So today I am providing a £63 million fund.
Order! We want to hear what the Chancellor of the Exchequer is actually saying. Enough. Chancellor.
Today I am providing a £63 million fund to keep our public leisure centres and pools afloat. I have also heard from my right honourable friend, the Charities Minister, and his Secretary of State about the brilliant work third sector organisations are doing to help people struggling in tough times. They can often reach people in need that central or local government cannot. So I will give his department £100 million to support thousands of local charities and community organisations do their fantastic work. I also note the personal courage of one of my predecessors, my right honourable friend from Bromsgrove, in talking about the tragedy of suicide and the importance of preventing it. We already invest a lot in this area, but I will assign an extra £10 million over the next 2 years, nearly £1 million for every year that he's been in Parliament, to help the voluntary sector play an even bigger role in stopping families experiencing that intolerable heartache. My penultimate cost of living measure concerns one of our other most treasured community institutions, the Great British Pub. In December, I extended the alcohol duty freeze until the 1st of August, after which duties will go up in line with inflation in the usual way. But today, I will do something that was not possible when we were in the EU and significantly increase the generosity of draft relief so that from the 1st of August, the duty on draft products in pubs will be up to 11 pence lower than the duty in supermarkets. It's a differential a Conservative government will maintain as part of a new Brexit pubs guarantee. Madam Deputy Speaker, British ale is warm, but the duty on a pint is frozen. And even better, thanks to the Windsor framework negotiated by my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, that change will now apply to every pub in Northern Ireland. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've heard the representations from the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent North, my right honourable friend for Witham, and my right honourable friend from South Thanet and the Sun newspaper about the impact on motorists of the planned 11 pence rise in fuel duty. I noticed the party opposite called for a freeze on this duty. Somehow they forgot to tell the British people they have voted against every single fuel duty freeze for the last 12 years. Because inflation remains high, I have decided now is not the right time to uprate fuel duty with inflation or increase the duty. So here's what I'm going to do for a further 12 months. I'm going to maintain the 5p cut and I'm going to freeze fuel duty too. That saves the average driver £100 next year and around £200 since the 5p cut was introduced. Our energy price guarantee, fuel duty and duty on a pint all frozen in today's budget. That doesn't just help families, it helps the economy too, because their combined impact reduces CPI inflation by nearly 0.75% this year, lowering inflation when it is particularly high. I now turn to the Prime Minister's second priority, which is to reduce debt. Here too, our plan is on track. Underlying debt is forecast to be 92.4% of GDP next year, then 97.3%, 94.6%, 94.8%, before falling to 94.6% in 27-28. We are meeting the debt priority. And with a buffer of £6.5 billion, it means we are meeting our fiscal rule to have debt falling as a percentage of GDP by the 5th year of the forecast. As a proportion of GDP, our debt remains lower than the USA, Canada, France, Italy and Japan. And because of the decisions I take today and the improved outlook for public finances, underlying debt in 5 years' time is now forecast to be nearly 3 percentage points of GDP lower than it was in the autumn. That means more money for our public services and a lower burden for future generations, deeply held conservative values which we put into practice today. At the autumn statement, I also announced that public sector net borrowing must be below 3% of GDP over the same period. The OBR confirmed today that we're meeting that rule with a buffer of £39.2 billion. In fact, our deficit falls in every single year of the forecast, with borrowing falling from 5.1% of GDP in 23-24 to 3.2% to 2.8% to 2.2% and 1.7% in 27-28. Even better, in the final 2 years of the forecast, our current budget is in surplus, meaning we only borrow for investment and not for day-to-day spending. Day-to-day departmental spending will grow at 1% a year on average in real terms after 24-25 until the end of the forecast period. Capital plans are maintained at the same level set at the autumn statement. We will uprate tobacco duty and we will freeze the gross gaming duty yield bands. We're also maintaining the starting rate for savings and ISA subscription limits, and we'll bring forward a range of measures to tackle promoters of tax avoidance schemes. Madam Deputy Speaker, taken together, today's measures lead to a slightly lower overall tax burden for the rest of the Parliament compared to the OBR's autumn forecast. Other parties run out of money, but a Conservative government is reducing borrowing and improving our public finances. By doing so, we are on track to halve inflation, get debt falling and grow our economy, which I turn to next. Growth, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the Prime Minister's third priority and the focus of today's budget. "13 years ago, we inherited an economy that had crashed. But since they might want to listen to this, because since 2010, we've grown more than major countries like France, Italy or Japan, about the same as Europe's largest economy, Germany. We've halved unemployment, we've cut inequality, we've reduced the number of workless households by 1 million. For the first time ever, because of rises in tax thresholds made by successive Conservative chancellors, people in our country can earn £1,000 a month without paying a penny of tax or national insurance. The party opposite opposed those tax reductions, but they have helped lift 2 million people out of absolute poverty after housing costs, including 400,000 pensioners and 500,000 children. That averages 80 pensioners and 100 children lifted out of poverty for every single day we've been in office. And today we face the future with extraordinary potential. The World Bank said that of all big European countries, we are the best place to do business. Global chief executives say that apart from America and China, we are the best country to invest in. We became the second country in the world to have a stock of foreign direct investment worth $2 trillion. And London has just pipped New York and 53 other global cities to be the best place in the world for female entrepreneurs. Declinists are wrong about our country for another reason, which is our strength in new industries that will shape this century. Over the last 13 years, under Conservative leadership, we have become the world's third trillion-dollar tech economy after the US and China. We've built the largest life sciences sector in Europe, producing a COVID vaccine that saved 6 million lives and a treatment that saved 1 million more. Our film and TV industry has become Europe's largest, with our creative industries growing at twice the rate of the economy. Our advanced manufacturing industries produce around half the world's large civil aircraft wings. And thanks to a clean energy miracle, we have become a world leader in offshore wind. Yeah. Other parties talk about a green energy revolution. So I gently remind them that nearly 90% of our solar power was installed in the last 13 years, showing it's the Conservatives who fix the roof when the sun is shining. Now, let's turn to what the OBR say about our growth prospects. In November, they expected that the UK economy would enter recession in 2022 and contract by 1.4% in 23. That left many families feeling concerned about the future. But today, the OBR forecast we will not enter a recession at all this year, with a contraction of just 0.2%. And after this year, the UK economy will grow in every single year of the forecast period by 1.8% in 24, 2.5%, 2.1% and 1.9% in 27. They also expect the unemployment rate to rise by less than 1 percentage point to 4.4%, with 170,000 fewer people out of work compared to their autumn forecast. Madam Deputy Speaker, that return to growth has direct consequences for our role on the global stage. I am proud that we are giving the brave people of Ukraine more military support than anyone else in Europe. On Monday, we were able to go even further, with my right honourable friend announcing a £5 billion package of funding for the Ministry of Defence, an additional £2 billion next year and £3 billion the year after. Today, following representations from our persuasive Defence Secretary, I confirm that we will add a total of £11 billion to our defence budget over the next 5 years, and it will be nearly 2.25% of GDP by 2025. We were the first large European country to commit to 2% of GDP for defence, and we will now raise that to 2.5% as soon as fiscal and economic circumstances allow. And following representations from the equally persuasive Minister for Veterans Affairs, I am today also increasing support for our brave ex-servicemen and women. We will provide a package worth over £30 million to increase the capacity of the Office for Veterans Affairs, support veterans with injuries returning from their service, and increase the availability of veteran housing. But to be Europe's biggest defender of democracy, we must build Europe's most dynamic economy. That means tackling our long-standing productivity issues, including two in particular which I address today: lower business investment and higher economic inactivity than other countries. Too often, companies struggle to recruit, and even when they do, output per employee is lower. So today I set out the 4 pillars of our industrial strategy to address these issues. Colleagues will know from my Bloomberg speech, they all conveniently start with the letter E: enterprise, employment, education and everywhere. I start, Madam Deputy Speaker, with everywhere. Our measures, well, they may not want to level up growth across the United Kingdom, but we do. This government was elected on a mandate to level up. We have already allocated nearly £4 billion in over 200 projects across the country through the first 2 rounds of the Levelling Up Fund. A third round will follow. Since we started focusing on levelling up, 70% of the growth in salaried jobs has come from outside London and the South East. And today we take further steps. Canary Wharf and the Liverpool Docks were 2 outstanding regeneration projects that happened under a previous Conservative government. I pay tribute to Lord Heseltine for making them happen because they transformed the lives of thousands of people. They showed what's possible when entrepreneurs, government and local communities come together. So today I announce that we will deliver 12 new investment zones, 12 potential Canary Wharfs. In England, we've identified the following areas as having the potential to host one: West Midlands, Greater Manchester, the North East, South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, East Midlands, Teesside and once again Liverpool. There will also be at least one in each of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. To be chosen, each area must identify a location where they can offer a bold and imaginative partnership between local government and a university or research institute in a way that catalyses new innovation clusters. If the application is successful, they'll have access to £80 million of support for a range of interventions including skills, infrastructure, tax reliefs and business rates retention. Working together with our formidable Levelling Up Secretary, I also want to give some further support to levelling up areas under the E of everywhere. First, I will invest over £200 million in high-quality local regeneration projects across England, including the regeneration of Tipton Town Centre and the Marsden New Mills redevelopment scheme. I'm also announcing a further £161 million for regeneration projects in mayoral combined authorities and the Greater London Authority, and I will make over £400 million available for new levelling up partnerships in areas that include Redcar and Cleveland, Blackburn, Oldham, Rochdale, Mansfield, South Tyneside and Bassetlaw. Having listened to the case for better local transport infrastructure from many honourable members, I can announce a second round of the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlements allocating £8.8 billion over the next 5-year funding period. And following a wet, then cold winter, I have also received particularly strong representations from my honourable friends from North Devon, South West Devon and Newton Abbot, as well as Councillor Peter Martin from my own constituency, about the curse of potholes. The spending review allocated £500 million every year to the Potholes Fund, but today I have decided to increase that fund by a further £200 million next year to help local communities tackle this problem. For Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, this budget delivers not only a new investment zone, but an additional £320 million for the Scottish Government, £180 million for the Welsh Government, and £130 million for the Northern Ireland Executive as a result of Barnett's consequentials. On top of which in Scotland I can announce up to £8.6 million of targeted funding for the Edinburgh Festivals, as well as £1.5 million funding to repair the Clodagh Bridge. I will provide £20 million of funding for the Welsh Government to restore the Holyhead breakwater, and in Northern Ireland I'm allocating up to £3 million to extend the Tackling Paramilitarism programme and up to £40 million to extend further and higher education participation. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, for levelling up to truly succeed, we need to unleash the civic entrepreneurship that's only possible when elected local leaders are able to fund and deliver solutions to their own challenges. That means giving them responsibility for local economic growth and the benefit from the upside when it happens. So this government will consult on transferring responsibilities for local economic development from local enterprise partnerships to local authorities from April 24. I will also boost mayors' financial autonomy by agreeing multi-year single settlements for the West Midlands and Greater Combined Manchester Authority in the next spending review, something I intend to roll out for all mayoral areas over time. I've also agreed a new long-term commitment so that they can retain 100% of their business rates, something I also hope to expand to other areas. Investment zones, regeneration projects, levelling up partnerships, local transport infrastructure and business rates retention, more control for local communities over their economic destiny, so we will level up wealth and opportunity everywhere. Today's priority is the Prime Minister's promise to grow the economy. We've talked about making that growth happen everywhere, so I now move on to my second E, enterprise. We need to be, well, this has never been something of interest to the Labour Party, but for Conservatives, we won't rest until we are Europe's most dynamic enterprise economy. And under a Conservative government, that is exactly what's been happening. Since 2010, we have 1 million more businesses in the UK, a bigger increase than Germany, France or Italy. But I want another million and another million after that. So today I bring forward enterprise measures in these three areas to lower business taxes, reduce energy costs and support our growth industries. So let's start with business taxation. Conservatives know the importance of a competitive tax regime. We already have lower levels of business taxation than France, Germany, Italy or Japan. But I want us to have the most pro-business, pro-enterprise tax regime anywhere. Even after the corporation tax rise this April, we will have the lowest headline rate in the G7, lower than any period under the last Labour government. Only 10% of companies will pay the full 25% rate. But even at 19%, our corporation tax did not incentivise investment as effectively as countries with higher headline rates. The result is less capital investment and lower productivity than countries like France and Germany. We've already taken measures to address this. For larger business, we've had the super deduction, introduced by my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, which ends this month. For smaller businesses, we've increased the annual investment allowance to £1 million, meaning 99% of all businesses can deduct the full value of all their investment from that year's taxable profits. If the super deduction was allowed to end without a replacement, we would have fallen down the international league tables on tax competitiveness and damaged growth. As a Conservative, I could not allow that to happen. So today I can announce we will introduce a new policy of full capital expensing for the next 3 years, with an intention to make it permanent as soon as we can responsibly do so. That means that every single pound a company invests in IT equipment, plant or machinery can be deducted in full and immediately from taxable profits. It is a corporation tax cut worth an average of £9 billion a year for every year that it's in place. And its impact on the economy will be huge. The OBR says it will increase in business investment by 3% for every year it's in place. This decision makes us the only major European country with full expensing and gives us the joint most generous capital allowance regime of any advanced economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, I understand the party opposite is reviewing business taxes. Let me save them the bother. They put them up, we cut them. I also want to make our taxes more competitive in our life science and creative industries sectors. In the autumn, I said I'd return with a more robust R&D tax credit scheme for smaller research-intensive companies. So today, I'm introducing an enhanced credit, which means that if a qualifying small or medium-sized business spends 40% or more of their total expenditure on R&D, they'll be able to claim a credit worth £27 for every £100 they spend. That means an eligible cancer drug company spending £2 million on research and development will receive over £500,000 to help them develop breakthrough treatments. It's a £1.8 billion package of support, helping 20,000 cutting-edge companies who day by day are turning Britain into a science superpower. And this government's audiovisual tax reliefs have helped make our film and TV industry the biggest in Europe. Only last month, Pinewood announced an expansion which will bring another 8,000 jobs to the UK. To give even more momentum to this critical sector, I'll introduce an expenditure credit with a rate of 34% for film, high-end television and video games, and 39% for the animation and children's TV sectors. I'll maintain the qualifying threshold for high-end television at £1 million. And because our theatres, orchestras and museums do such a brilliant job at attracting tourists to London and the UK, I'll extend for another 2 years their current 45% and 50% reliefs. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, an enterprise economy needs low taxes, but it also needs cheap and reliable energy. We have already announced billions of support to help businesses reduce their energy bills through the Energy Bills Relief Scheme and the Energy Bills Discount Scheme. We've appointed Dame Alison Rose, Chief Executive of NatWest, to co-chair our National Energy Efficiency Task Force and help deliver our national ambition to reduce energy use by 15%. And to support her efforts, I'll extend the Climate Change Agreement Scheme for 2 years to allow eligible businesses £600 million of tax relief on energy efficiency measures. But the long-term solution is not subsidy, but security. That means investing in domestic sources of energy that fall outside Putin or any autocrat's control. We are world leaders in renewable energy, so today I want to develop another plank of our green economy, carbon capture, usage and storage. I'm allocating up to £20 billion of support for the early development of CCUS, starting with projects from our East Coast to Merseyside to North Wales, paving the way for CCUS everywhere across the UK as we approach 2050. That will support up to 50,000 jobs, attract private sector investment, and help capture 20 to 30 million tonnes of CO2 per year by 2030. We have increased the proportion of electricity generated from renewables from under 10% when we came into office to nearly 40%. But because the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, even under the Conservatives, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will need another critical source of cheap and reliable energy, and that is nuclear. Now, there have been no more powerful advocates for this than the Honourable Member for Innismon, Copeland, Hartlepool and Workington. They rightly say that increasing nuclear capacity is vital to meet our net zero obligations. So to encourage private sector investment into our nuclear programme, I today confirm that, subject to consultation, nuclear power will be classed as environmentally sustainable in our green taxonomy. That will give it access to the same investment incentives as renewable energy. And alongside that will come more public investment. In the autumn statement, I announced the first state-financed investment in nuclear for a generation, a £700 million investment in Sizewell C. Today, I can announce 2 further commitments to deliver our nuclear ambitions. Firstly, following representations from our energetic Energy Security Secretary, I am announcing the launch of Great British Nuclear, which will bring down costs and provide opportunities across the nuclear supply chain to help provide 1/4 of our electricity by 2050. And secondly, it's so good to hear Labour in favour of nuclear energy. Just a shame they never did any. And secondly, I'm launching the first competition for small modular reactors. It will be completed by the end of this year, and if demonstrated as viable, we will co-fund this exciting new technology. Finally, under the E of enterprise, Madam Deputy Speaker, I come to our innovation economy, a central area of national competitive advantage for the United Kingdom. Over the weekend, I worked night and day with the Prime Minister and the Governor of Bank of England to protect the deposits of thousands of our most cutting-edge companies. We successfully secured the sale of the UK arm of Silicon Valley Bank to HSBC, so the future of those companies is now safe in the hands of Europe's biggest and one of its most creditworthy banks. But those events show that we need to build a larger, more diverse financing system where the benefits of investment in high-growth firms are available to more investors. So I will return in the autumn statement with a plan to deliver that. It will include measures to unlock productive investment from defined contribution pension funds and other sources, make the London Stock Exchange a more attractive place to list, and complete our response to the challenges created by the US Inflation Reduction Act. However, when it comes to our innovation industries, there are two areas I want to make progress on today. Nigel Lawson made the City of London one of the world's top financial centres by competitive deregulation. With our Brexit autonomy, we can do the same for our high-growth sectors. So today I want to reform the regulations around medicines and medical technologies. We are lucky with the MHRA to have one of the most respected drugs regulators in the world, indeed the very first anywhere to license a COVID vaccine. From 2024, they will move to a different model, which will allow rapid, often near automatic sign-off for medicines and technologies already approved by trusted regulators in other parts of the world, such as the United States, Europe and Japan. At the same time, they will set up a swift new approval process for the most cutting-edge medicines and devices to ensure the UK becomes a global centre for their development. And with an extra £10 million of funding over the next 2 years, they will put in place the quickest, simplest regulatory approval in the world for companies seeking rapid market access. We are proud of the life science sector, which received more inward investment than any in Europe last year. Today's change will make the UK an even more exciting place to invest, using our Brexit freedoms and speeding up access for NHS patients to the very newest drugs. Today, with our talented Science, Innovation and Technology Secretary, I also take measures to strengthen our position in artificial intelligence, where the UK hosts 1/3 of all European companies. I'm accepting all 9 of the digital technology recommendations made by Sir Patrick Vallance in the review I asked him to do in the autumn statement. That means I can report to the House that we will launch an AI sandbox to trial new, faster approaches to help innovators get cutting-edge products to market. We'll work at pace with the Intellectual Property Office to provide clarity on IP rules so that generative AI companies can access the material they need. And we'll ask Sir Patrick's successor, Dame Angela McLean, to report before the summer on options around the growth duty for regulators. Because AI needs computing horsepower, I today commit around £900 million of funding to implement the recommendations of the Independent Future of Compute review for an exascale computer. The power needed by AI's complex algorithms can also be provided by quantum computing. So today we'll publish a quantum strategy which will set out our vision to be a world-leading quantum-enabled economy by 2033 with a research and innovation programme totalling £2.5 billion. I also want to encourage the best AI research to happen in the UK, so we'll award a prize of £1 million every year for the next 10 years to the person or team that does the most groundbreaking British AI research. The world's first stored program computer was built at the University of Manchester in 1948 and was known as the Manchester Baby. 75 years on, the baby has grown up, so I will call this new National AI Award the Manchester Prize in its honour. Madam Deputy Speaker, we want the UK to be the best place in Europe for companies to locate, invest and grow. So today's enterprise measures strengthen our technology and life science sectors, invest in energy security and for 3 years, but I hope permanently, cut corporation tax by £9 billion a year to give us the best investment incentives of any advanced economy. Yeah. An enterprise economy can only grow if it can hire the people it needs. Which brings me to my third pillar, after everywhere and enterprise. I said it was a growth budget, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we are talking about the E of employment. I'm going to talk about a difficult topic for the party opposite now, because Brexit was a decision by the British people to change our economic model. In that historic vote, our country decided to move from a model based on unlimited low-skill migration to one based on high wages and high skills. Today, we show how we will deliver that with a major set of reforms. The OBR say it is the biggest positive supply-side intervention they have ever recognised in their forecast. We have around 1 million vacancies in the economy. But excluding students, there are over 7 million adults of working age who are not in work. That's a potential pool of 7 people for every vacancy. Conservatives believe work is a virtue. We agree with the road haulage king Eddie Stobart, who said the only place success comes before work is the dictionary. So today I bring forward reforms to remove the barriers that stop people who want to from working. And I start with over 2 million people who are inactive due to a disability or long-term sickness. Thanks to the reforms courageously introduced by the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green, the number of disabled people in work has risen by 2 million since 2013. But even after that, we could fill half the vacancies in the economy with people who say they would like to work despite being inactive due to sickness or disability, with Zoom, Teams and new working models that make it easier to work from home. This is possible now more than ever. So for that reason, the ever-diligent Work and Pensions Secretary today takes the next step in his groundbreaking work on tackling economic inactivity. I thank him for that. And today we publish a white paper on disability benefits reform. It is the biggest change to our welfare system in a decade. His plans will abolish the work capability assessment in Great Britain and separate benefit entitlement from an individual's ability to work. As a result, disabled benefit claimants will always be able to seek work without fear of losing financial support. Today I'm going further by announcing that in England and Wales, after listening to representations from the Centre for Social Justice and others, we will fund a new programme called Universal Support. This is a new voluntary employment scheme for disabled people where the government will spend up to £4,000 a person to help them find appropriate jobs and put in place the support they need. It will fund 50,000 places every single year. We also want to help those who are forced to leave work because of a health condition such as a back pain or a mental health issue. We should give them support before they end up leaving their job. So working with our Health Secretary, I'm announcing a £400 million plan to increase the availability of mental health and musculoskeletal resources and expand the individual placement and support scheme. And because occupational health provided by employers has a key role to play, I'll also bring forward 2 new consultations on how to improve its availability and double the funding for the small company subsidy pilot. There's another group that deserve particular attention, which is children in care. They too should be given all possible help to make a normal working life possible when they reach adulthood. Often they depend on foster families who do a brilliant job. So today I'm nearly doubling the qualifying care relief threshold to £18,140, which will give a tax cut to a qualifying carer worth an average of £450 a year. I'll also increase the funding we provide to the Staying Close programme by 50% to help more care leavers into employment, and I'll support young people with special educational needs and disabilities with a £3 million pilot expansion of the Department for Education's supported internship programme to help those people transition from education into the workplace. Madam Deputy Speaker, no civilised society can ignore the contribution that can be made by those with challenging family circumstances, a long-term illness or a disability. So today we remove the barriers we can with reforms that strengthen our society as well as strengthening our economy. The next set of employment reforms affects those on universal credit without a health condition who are looking for work or on low earnings. There are more than 2 million job seekers in this group, more than enough to fill every vacancy in the economy. Independence is always better than dependence, which is why a Conservative government believes with some exceptions, Madam Deputy Speaker, independence is always better than dependence, which is why a Conservative government believes those who can work should. So sanctions will be applied more rigorously to those who fail to meet strict work search requirements or choose not to take up a reasonable job offer. And for those working low hours, we will increase the administrative earnings threshold from the equivalent of 15 hours to 18 hours at national living wage for an individual claimant, meaning that anyone working below this level will receive more work coach support alongside a more intensive conditionality regime. The next group of workers I want to support are those aged over 50. My younger officials have termed these people older workers, although as a 56-year-old myself, I prefer the term experienced. Fully 3.5 million people of pre-retirement age over 50 are not part of the labour force, an increase of 320,000 since before the pandemic. We now have the 23rd highest inactivity rate for over 55s in the OECD. If we match the rate of Sweden, we would add more than 1 million people to our national labour force. Madam Deputy Speaker, I say this not to flatter you, but older people are the most skilled and experienced people we have. No country can thrive if it turns its back on such a wealth of talent and ability. But for too many, turning 50 is a moment of anxiety about the cliff edge of retirement, rather than a moment of anticipation about another 2 decades of fulfilment. I know this, Madam Deputy Speaker, myself. After I turned 50, I was relegated to the backbenches and planned for a quiet life, but instead I decided to set an example by embarking on a new career in finance. So today I take 3 steps to make it easier for those who wish to. It's going well, thank you. And today I take 3 steps to make it easier for those who wish to work longer. First, we will increase the number of people who get the best possible financial, health and career guidance ahead of retirement by enhancing the DWP's excellent midlife MOT strategy. They will also increase by 5-fold the number of 50-plus universal credits who receive midlife MOTs from 8,000 to 40,000 a year. Second, with my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, who has a deep personal commitment to this area, will introduce a new kind of apprenticeship targeted at the over 50s who want to return to work. They will be called returnerships and operate alongside skills boot camps and sector-based work academies. They'll bring together our existing skills programmes to make them more appealing for older workers, focusing on flexibility and previous experience to reduce training length. Finally, I have listened to the concerns of many senior NHS clinicians who say unpredictable pension tax charges are making them leave the NHS just when they are needed the most. The NHS is our biggest employer. and we will shortly publish a long-term workforce plan that I promised in the autumn statement. But ahead of that, I don't want any doctor to retire early because of the way pension taxes work. It's an issue I've discussed not just with the current Health Secretary, but a former Health Secretary who kindly took a break from WhatsApping his colleagues to consider it. As Chancellor, I have realised the issue goes wider than doctors. No one should be pushed out of the workforce for tax reasons. So today I will increase the pension's annual tax-free allowance by 50%, from 40,000 to 60,000. Some have also asked me to increase the lifetime allowance from its £1 million limit. But I've decided not to do that. Instead, I will go further and abolish the lifetime allowance altogether. It is a pension tax reform that will stop over 80% of NHS doctors from receiving a tax charge, incentivise our most experienced and productive workers to stay in work for longer, and simplify our tax system, taking thousands of people out of the complexity.
Order. Just because the Chancellor of the Exchequer is either unpopular or popular, we still have to keep the noise down because we still have to hear what he has to say. He has more to say. Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a comprehensive plan to remove the barriers to work facing those on benefits, those with health conditions and older workers. That is the E of the employment pillar of today's growth budget. Which brings me to the final pillar of our growth plan. After employment, enterprise and everywhere, I turn to the E of education. Over more than a decade, this Conservative government has driven improvement in our education system. We've risen by nearly 10 places in the international league tables for English and maths since 2015 alone. In the autumn statement, I built on this programme with an extra £2.3 billion annual investment to our schools. We're reviewing our approach to skills with Sir Michael Barber. We set out our plans to transform lifelong learning with a new lifelong loan entitlement. And my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, announced plans to make maths compulsory till 18. But today I want to address an issue in our education system that is bad for children and damaging for the economy. It's an issue that starts even before a child enters the gates of a school. Today I want to reform our childcare system. We have one of the most expensive systems in the world. Almost half of non-working mothers say they would prefer to work if they could arrange suitable childcare. For many women, a career break becomes a career end. Our female participation rate is higher than average for OECD economies, but we trail top performers like Denmark and the Netherlands. If we match Dutch levels of participation, there would be more than 1 million additional women working. And we can do that. So today I announce a series of reforms that start that journey. I begin with the supply of childcare. We've seen a significant decline in childminders over recent years, down 9% in England in just 1 year. But childminders are a vital way to deliver affordable and flexible care, and we need more of them. So I've listened to representations from my honourable friend from Stroud. And decided to address this by piloting incentive payments of £600 for childminders who sign up to the profession, rising to £1,200 for those who join through an agency. I've also heard many concerns about cost pressures facing the sector. We know this is making it hard to hire staff and raising prices for parents, with around 2/3 of childcare providers increasing fees last year alone. So we'll increase the funding paid to nurseries providing free childcare under the Hours offer by £204 million from this September, rising to £288 million next year. That's an average of a 30% increase in the 2-year-old rate this year, just as the sector has requested. I will also offer providers more flexibility in how they operate in line with other parts of the UK, So alongside that additional funding, we will change minimum staff-to-child ratios from 1 to 4 to 1 to 5 for 2-year-olds in England, as happens in Scotland, although the new ratios will remain optional with no obligation on either childminders or parents to adopt them. I want to help the 700,000 parents on universal credit who, until the reforms I announced today, had limited requirements to look for work. Many remain out of work because they cannot afford the upfront payment necessary to access subsidised childcare. So for any parents who are moving into work or want to increase their hours, we will pay the childcare costs up front. And we will increase the maximum they can claim to £951 for one child and £1,630 for 2 children, an increase of almost 50%. I turn now to parents of school-age children who often face barriers to working because of the limited availability of wraparound care. 1/3 of primary schools do not offer childcare at both ends of the school day, even though for many people a job requires it to be available before and after school. To address this, we'll fund schools and local authorities to increase the supply of wraparound care so all school-age parents can drop their children off between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And our ambition is that all schools will start to offer a full wraparound offer, either on their own or in partnership with other schools, by September 2026. Madam Deputy Speaker, today's childcare reforms will increase the availability of childcare, reduce costs and increase the number of parents able to use it. Taken together with earlier Conservative reforms, they amount to the most significant improvements to childcare provision in a decade. But if we really want to remove the barriers to work, we need to go further for parents who have a child under 3. For them, childcare remains just too expensive. In 2010, there was barely any free childcare for under 5s. A Conservative-led government changed that with free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds in England. It was a landmark reform, but not a complete one. I don't want any parent with a child under 5 to be prevented from working if they want to, because it's damaging to our economy and unfair mainly to women. So today I announce that in eligible households where all adults are working at least 16 hours, we will introduce 30 hours of free childcare, not just for 3- and 4-year-olds, but for every single child over the age of 9 months. The 30-hour offer will now start from the moment maternity or paternity leave ends. It's a package worth, on average, £6,500 every year for a family with a 2-year-old child using 35 hours of childcare every week and reduces their childcare costs by nearly 60%. Because it is such a large reform, we will introduce it in stages to ensure there is enough supply in the market. Working parents of 2-year-olds will be able to access 15 hours of free care from April 2024, helping around 500,000 parents. From September 24, that 15 hours will be extended to all children from 9 months up, meaning a total of nearly 1 million parents will be eligible. And from September 25, every single working parent of under 5s will have access to 30 hours free childcare per week. Madam Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Perkins, stop it.
Madam Deputy Speaker, today we complete a landmark Conservative reform. We help the economy, transform the lives of thousands of women and build a childcare system comparable to the best. A major early years reform for our education system, the E of education alongside the 3 other pillars of our growth plan, enterprise, employment and everywhere. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, in November we delivered stability. Today it's growth. We tackle the 2 biggest barriers that stop businesses growing: investment incentives and labour supply. The best investment incentives in Europe, the biggest ever employment package, for disabled people more help, for older people barriers removed, for families feeling the pinch, fuel duty frozen, beer duty cut, energy bills capped, and for parents 30 hours of free childcare for all under fives. Today, we build for the future, with inflation down, debt falling and growth up. The declinists are wrong and the optimists are right. We stick to the plan because the plan is working, and I commend this statement to the House.
I thank the Chancellor of the Exchequer for his budget statement, and I hope the House will settle down, please. Under Standing Order number 51, the first motion entitled, it's really the bad behaviours now on this side of the House. I think a little bit of decorum, please, while we go through the necessary parts of the procedure. Under Standing Order number 51, the first motion entitled Provisional Collection of Taxes must be decided without debate. Will the Chancellor of the Exchequer please move formally? Chancellor, well, somebody, just say formally. Thank you, Chancellor. I'm just putting your motions. The question is that, pursuant to Section 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968, provisional statutory effect shall be given to the following motions. A. Stamp duty land tax transaction funded with the assistance of a subsidy, motion number 39. B. Fuel duties accepted machines, motion number 44. C. Rates of tobacco products duty, motion number 46. D. Late payment interest value-added tax, motion number 57. E. Charities value-added tax, etc. Motion number 65. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Let us now consider the motion entitled Income Tax Charge, for it's on this motion that the debate will take place today and on the succeeding days. The questions on this motion and on the remaining motions will be put at the end of the budget debate on Tuesday, the 21st of March. So I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move the motion formally.
Move formally.
The question is that income tax is charged for the tax year 2023 to 24. And it is declared that it is expedient in the public interest that this resolution should have statutory effect under the provisions of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968. And now, I call the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I say it's good to see you back in the chair?
Looking radiant.
So, for all the hype, a budget for growth that downgrades the growth forecast. His opening boast was that things aren't quite as bad now as they were in October last year after the kamikaze budget. And the more that he pretends everything is fine, the more he shows just how out of touch they are. After 13 years of his government, our economy needed major surgery. But like millions across our country, this budget leaves us stuck in the waiting room with only a sticking plaster to hand. A country set on a path of managed decline, falling behind our competitors, the sick man of Europe once again. This was a day for ambition, for bringing us together with purpose and intent, for unlocking the pride that is in every community, matching their belief in the possibilities of the future. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, after today, we know the Tory cupboard is as bare as the salad aisle in our supermarket. The lettuces may be out, but the turnips are in. A hopelessly divided party caught between a rock of decline and a hard place of their own economic recklessness, dressing up stagnation as stability as their expiry date looms ever closer. And the figures published today spell it out. A year of stagnation, growth non-existent. According to the IMF, the worst performing country in the G7 this year. A prediction today confirmed by the OBR and growth downgraded in years to come. This is a failure you can measure not just in the figures, but in the empty pockets of working people right across the country. 13 years without wage growth. 13 years no better off. 13 years stuck in a doom loop of lower growth, higher taxes and broken public services. Madam Speaker, our OBR makes clear today things don't look any better in the long run.
No.
A broken labour market holding back our prospects. 7 million on the NHS waiting lists. Ill health and disability on the rise. And the consequences, as we've just heard, deferred to the future. The classic short-term sticking plaster cycle. Decisions cynically ducked today, pain for working people tomorrow. It doesn't have to be like this. Britain has enormous potential. On science, innovation, technology, we should be leading, not lagging. We need an industrial strategy that removes barriers to investment. And the announcements today are nowhere near the mark. The lowest investment in the G7. That's their record. All our competitors know this. They're gearing up for an almighty race for the opportunities of tomorrow. And we've got to be on the start line, not back in the changing room, tying our laces. Now, he mentioned the war in Ukraine. And of course, on this side of the House, we stand with Ukraine and we stand with the government's response to Putin's brutality. We'll look carefully at the details of the military spending announced and we will support them. But what we cannot accept is the use of the war as a blanket excuse for failure. Our economy has weak foundation. Global crises hit Britain more than other countries. Wages in this country are lower now in real terms than they were 13 years ago. The average French family is a tenth richer. The average German family a fifth richer. Countries which face the same pandemic, countries which face the same war. And the war didn't ban onshore wind. The war didn't scrap our home insulation scheme. The war didn't run down our gas storage facilities. They did. Decisions which hurt working people battling the cost of living crisis right now. It's been the same story for the whole 13 years. Always the sticking plaster, never the cure, and today's budget does nothing to change that. Again, we see a failure to grip the long-term challenges. No.
Order. People shouldn't just be speaking while the Leader of the Opposition is delivering his report. They should be listening. Now, we will now listen to the Leader of the Opposition. Sir.
Today's budget changes nothing. Again, we see a failure to grip the long-term challenges. No determination to create growth which unlocks the potential of the many. Working people being made to pay for Tory choices and Tory mistakes. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the organising principles of Conservative economics. Judge them by their choices. The running down of our public services, paid for by working people. The disaster of the Tory mortgage premium, paid for by working people. The opportunities still missed for a proper windfall tax, paid for by working people. That's what makes the Chancellor's boast about lower inflation so ridiculous. The idea that it's a tax cut. British people can see through that. They see their tax burden at its highest level for 70 years. And they know it's not the government that's lowering inflation, it's working people, earning less, enjoying less. It's their sacrifice that is helping to bring inflation down. And they deserve better than another cheap trick from the government of gimmicks, making them pay whilst trying to claim the credit. And even with the price guarantee, the average energy bill has doubled in 18 months. Because of their recklessness, the average mortgage payment is up £2,000 a year. A massive hit to living standards, however they cook the books. And yet, still, no real ambition on industrial strategy. No real ambition on the clean energy that will give us cheaper bills. No real ambition on house building. the same old Tory choices: sticking plaster politics, no growth for the many, working people pay. And let's turn to his policies on the cost of living. Madam Deputy Speaker, I say his policies because there's a history to this, a pattern. Over the course of the whole cost of living crisis, time and again, it's Labour who bring the government not just to its senses, but to our position. Who first pushed for the energy price guarantee? Labour. Who first called for a proper windfall tax? Labour. Who first stood by people on prepayment meters? Labour. And who first said we should freeze the price guarantee this April? Labour. And we can go on, because it's also Labour that first committed to extending the fuel duty cut, a policy that in January he dismissed as part of a dossier that he published. So, for one poor soul in their research team at least, this really is a back-to-work budget. And a word of advice for the Chancellor as he promotes this policy in coming days. Use your own car, and for heaven's sake, make sure you know how to use a debit card. And I look forward to the Prime Minister promoting the swimming pools policy. Unlike the car, he won't have to borrow one of those. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the cost of living crisis is not over. And once again, they've left money on the table when it comes to oil and gas companies. Money that could have been better spent on working people. Politics is about whose side you're on. There are loopholes that urgently need closing. Even the former CEO of Shell admitted that they should be paying more. And the long-term plan just isn't there. The same old Tory choices, the same three principles: sticking plaster politics, no growth for the many, working people pay. And you see those principles at play in our broken labour market. Much of what the Chancellor said today focused on that, as well it might. The figures announced in this budget show how damaging the current situation is to growth, a long-term drag on our ability to create more wealth. Our inactivity levels are particularly shocking, up 500,000 since the pandemic, the worst jobs recovery since the G7, people unable to work because of ill health more than ever before. Now, we will look at what the Chancellor's announced today, because on these benches we've long called for reform of the work capability assessment, for a welfare system that supports people with disabilities and long-term health conditions to thrive at work. The universal credit system must help people into employment, and childcare is a huge barrier to that. We've made the case for reform. But on childcare, of course, more money in the system is obviously a good thing. They obviously didn't listen to when he said he's actually going to do it.
They won't be here.
And we've seen the Tories expand so-called free hours before. And as parents up and down the country know, it's no use having more free hours if you can't access them. And it pushes the cost for parents outside the offer. That's what we've seen before. And on pensions, he made a big spending commitment, which will benefit those with the broadest shoulders, where many people are struggling to save into their pension. We needed a fix for doctors, but the announcement today is a huge giveaway to some of the very wealthiest. The only permanent tax cut in the budget is for the richest 1%. How can that possibly be a priority for this government? The truth is, our labour market is the cast-iron example of an economy with weak foundations. Our crisis in participation simply hasn't happened elsewhere, not to this extent. It's a feature of Tory Britain, and global excuses won't wash. We need a wider reform agenda. Instead of making working people pay, we need to make work pay. Move on from growth that's based on insecure, low-paid jobs to growth which comes from good work, from strong employment rights that can deliver higher productivity, growth from the many, for the many, that makes people better off in all parts of our country. I welcome his announcement on devolution deals, the principle that we should push power out of Westminster is fully supported on this side of the House. In fact, we want him to go further. Communities beyond Birmingham and Manchester deserve the right powers and the same powers to drive growth as well. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor is a former Health Secretary, a published author on health, no less. He gave me a signed copy of his book. He knows that growth needs an NHS fit for the future. And no country can be fit for work when there are 7 million people on hospital waiting lists.
Nothing to say about that.
So I was waiting for him to match Labour's ambition, waiting for him to match our plan to train more doctors and nurses, to tackle the capacity crisis, a policy he publicly praised just 15 days before he became Chancellor. And yet it never came. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, if there was ever a symbol of the poverty of ambition, that is it. Because the reality is the country getting sicker is a country getting poorer. And a country getting poorer is a country getting sicker. Health and wealth must go together. Britain can't afford to be the sick man of Europe. Britain can't afford the Tories. And there is another way. On these benches, we understand institutions must be respected, constraints accepted, that fiscal rules should be sound and followed rigorously, that every pound is precious and must not be wasted. But they want to shout about their record. Let them shout. Wages lower, taxes higher, borrowing higher, debt higher. Their chaos has a cost. Certainty is vital for the growth we need, essential for businesses and investors in our country. As we've spelt out, compared with a blanket cut to corporation tax, investment allowances are the right approach. But the question many businesses will ask today is, how long before the wind blows again and we all go through this again? And that's what they don't understand about business investment. Their endless fighting on tax is bad for growth in and of itself. Madam Deputy Speaker, real stability means that taxes don't go up and down like yo-yos. That R&D tax credit regime doesn't get overhauled twice in 6 months.
Order. OK, that's enough. I now can't hear the right honourable gentleman at all. Exactly. And it's nothing to do with being old. No. Quiet. Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you. Let me give an example of that instability. It's a bit of a fraught subject at the moment, but when he was Culture Secretary, the Chancellor apparently took some lessons on the rules of football. So let me provide a refresher. The amount of times his government has broken their fiscal rules, 11. That's one football team. The amount of times they've changed corporation tax policy, 22. That's 2 teams. You've got a game. But if he wants the post-max analysis, he'll have to consult the experts. Back on his screens and ours this weekend, I know the whole House will want to applaud that. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, a budget is not just about the choices made, but the choices ignored. Britain needs more than certainty for growth. That's the least we should expect. We need change, stability and success. Anyone listening to this and worried about NHS waiting lists, any about crime, it's about crime going unpunished. They don't want to hear about the waiting list. They don't want to hear about the crime going unpunished. House building rates falling. Don't want to hear about that either, I suppose, do you? They will have heard very little that makes them feel hopeful about our future. They could have used sensible taxation policies on non-DOMs or oil and gas companies and made the money work for working people, tackled the vested interests that gum up our planning system and shown real ambition on the investment we need to turn us into a green growth superpower. And that was the test today. Can we move beyond the usual sticking plaster solutions, set a new direction for growth that serves the interests of working people? But I'm afraid the verdict on this budget is clear. They won't offer change because they can't. And so our course is set. Managed decline, Britain going backwards, the sick man of Europe once again. That's the Britain they've created, and they should look it in the eye. Because today's figures on growth put their failures up in lights. After 13 years of Tory sticking plaster politics, 13 years of no growth for the many, 13 years of being asked to pay, working people are entitled to ask, am I any better off than I was before? And after 13 years, with no excuses left, nobody left to blame, no ambition or answers, the resounding answer is no, and they know it.
Right, now we'll just have things like just settle down a bit now, please. And if people are leaving, let's do so quickly and quietly, just out of consideration for everyone else who is still taking part in the debate. Before I come on, get a move on. Before I come to the chairman of the Treasury Select Committee, Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and wonderful to have you back in the Chamber today. After that torrent of socialist declinism from the opposition, I want to start by saying how lucky we are to have a lucky Chancellor. He has been lucky this winter because the weather has been a lot warmer than when he stood here in November, and as a result, the price of energy has come down. But he has also made some of his own luck, Madam Deputy Speaker, because thanks to the steps that he took, the financial markets have stabilised and he has had to pay less in interest than he was expecting to, about £4 billion. It is actually quite hard to believe that this is the first actual official budget that we've had in this chamber since October 2021. A lot of things have changed since the last time we had a budget. Our world-leading NHS vaccination rollout has ended the severe contagion of the pandemic, but Putin's evil and illegal invasion of Ukraine has sparked the worst inflation for 40 years. The challenges those events have placed on the public finances have been extraordinary, and the spending can't all be borrowed and passed on to the next generation. And that's why I welcome the news today from the Chancellor that he's forecasting 3% lower debt in years to come. Our committee, the Treasury Committee, welcomes the fact that the budget is accompanied by forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility. We think that it's important that that stands alongside a budget. It's a key part of the independent framework for chancellors, and we will be taking evidence from them next week on the underlying assumptions behind their forecasts. Because what has changed most perniciously since the last budget in October 2021 is inflation. It was only just beginning to rear its ugly head in October 2021. And as a member of the Treasury Committee throughout this entire period, I've been like Cassandra in highlighting some of the inflationary risks that we faced. Far from being transitory, as the Independent Bank of England hoped, inflation has become quite deeply embedded in the UK economy, in wage inflation and in expectations. And that's why I welcome the news today that the Office for Budget Responsibility is expecting that by the end of this year, inflation will be back down to 2.9% again. Because inflation is the worst tax that we have on our economy. It is a tax paid particularly by the very poorest, who spend the highest proportion of their incomes on food and energy. And so the Chancellor must not hear the siren voices urging him to increase or to abandon the inflation target that he gives to the Independent Bank of England. The top priority for our economy this year must be to at least halve inflation. It's to be welcomed that in his budget today, the Chancellor has tried to focus on measures that help to achieve that inflation target. The extension of the fuel duty freeze and the cap on household energy costs will all help to keep inflation lower by almost 1%, but lower than it would have been. And these may not feel like giveaways, but they do cost money against the do-nothing counterfactual option. So it's good to see that they're being implemented because of better public finances, and that these tax cuts can be seen as consistent with the government's second priority of reducing debt. In our recent Treasury Committee report, we called on the Chancellor to think again about the fiction that lies behind fuel duty forecasts. Every year they get embedded in the fiscal outlook, and every year Chancellors realise that it's not an ideal time to raise fuel duty. I welcome the fact that the fuel duty cut has been extended for another year, and that once again the fiction has not been followed through into reality. But I do think we need to think long and hard about why a tax that is inflationary, that harms growth, and is heading the way of the dodo as we all move to electric cars, is still in the forecast numbers. The third economic policy of growing the economy in a non-inflationary way will involve all of us working more productively. And the Stride Review, named after my illustrious predecessor, has rightly focused on this key question. And I think there were many measures that we can all see will be very helpful that were announced in today's budget, because with over 1 million job vacancies in our economy, we are still, as a country, working fewer hours than we were before the pandemic. And unlocking that human and economic potential is key to strong, productive, non-inflationary growth. So the steps that have been announced today on childcare and on pensions will help to ease the labour shortages that are pushing up wage demands, and they will help counter those inflationary pressures. And so the Treasury Committee looks forward to exploring all of these issues in detail with both our expert witnesses and with the Chancellor himself in our next evidence sessions, because the details really matter. The Treasury Committee has highlighted the new benefit cliff edges that my right honourable friend introduced last November when he announced that next winter only low-paid households will receive the £900 help with their cost of living. We asked for it to be spread into 6 instalments to reduce the risk of cliff edges. And we're sorry to hear that a somewhat clunky computer system means that there will be 3 instalments instead, because we worry that if you lose your job one day just after the qualifying date, you will miss out on a lot of help. And there are still cliff edges, taper rates and disincentives to work galore in our benefit and tax system, whether it's around free school meals, help with the childcare limits, child benefit tapers, tax-free childcare cliff edges, the withdrawal of the tax-free allowance, and the very welcome measures today announced on all those fronts, and with the pension cap abolition, will all be studied in detail by the committee. We're planning to work closely with our colleagues on the Work and Pensions Committee to find recommendations to smooth some of these cliff edges and distortions. And the Chancellor can see how these work as disincentives to adding more hours, and every hour of work should pay. I think that we've made huge progress towards that today.